Hello, and welcome to Take Action on Your Attribution Data, 3 tips for finding insights with multi-touch models. So growing up, my brother and I, we always wanted a dog as a pet, but my mom had some bad experiences with dogs growing up. She had a dog, it was a Dalmatian, aptly named Pepper, and she lived in this cul-de-sac, and whenever a car made a wrong turn into the cul-de-sac, or whenever someone left the cul-de-sac, Pepper would come chasing after the car, and just, it was an embarrassment to the entire family, and just, my mom always wondered what was motivating Pepper to chase after these cars. What would Pepper actually do if he caught the car? And I think as marketers, sometimes we feel this way about our data. We've been chasing after getting the data. Like, how can I actually measure my performance? How can I get this data? And now that, there's technology to support getting the data, what do you do with it? So now what? Now that we've caught the car, what do we do? A little bit about myself. My name is Allison Rouse. I'm a senior business analyst on the Full Circle team, on our customer success team. So I help customers deploy Full Circle products, do a lot of post-deployment support. And a little background on myself. I've been in marketing my entire career. Started out more in an online marketing ops kind of roles at several technology companies. And then I enjoyed marketing technology so much that I joined a demand gen agency where we help deploy marketing automation systems and nurture programs and all sorts of things. And I came to know Full Circle because I actually had several clients that used Full Circle. And I then wanted all my clients to use Full Circle because it was something that I felt was necessary. And I enjoyed working with those clients so much that I wanted to do it all the time, and so I joined the company. So this is one of my favorite cartoons about data-driven marketing. And if you guys don't know Tom Fishburne, who's going to actually be here tomorrow. But how many of you have felt like the guy in this cartoon at some point? I think that, a lot of marketers feel this way sometimes when they're looking, especially at attribution data, because it's kind of conceptual. But I want to introduce you to somebody who's using her marketing attribution data correctly and doing a really good job. And her name is Melinda, and she is a marketing scientist. And there's 3 things that Melinda's doing really, really well. Her approach to looking at attribution data is to come to the data with a certain hypothesis or a question she wants to answer. I find that a lot of folks, they look at the dashboards, their marketing attribution dashboards, and they're like, yeah, cool charts, but what do we do with it? So I think the best approach to analysis is to come to the data with a hypothesis or question. Another thing that Melinda does as a marketing scientist, she knows that a model is a model and that it has inherent biases. So she goes and finds and eliminates those biases. And then finally, as any good data-driven marketer, she never stops optimizing. So she's optimizing her campaigns based on the attribution data, and she's also optimizing her models based on the attribution data. So we're going to step into Melinda's shoes today and look at 3 of her most recent hypotheses. So her first hypothesis is her marketing team has done a lot of late-stage nurturing programs, and she wants to find out whether those nurturing programs met the goal that was intended, which was to decrease the time it took for the opportunity to close. The second hypothesis is she feels that this definitive guide white paper has the greatest impact on the business, the most influential campaign. So she wants to test whether that's true or not. And then finally, she believes that as prospects progress in their buyer's journey, that the social channel becomes a more and more influential channel as they make that path to purchase. So let's look at our first hypothesis. So we're going to find out whether late-stage nurturing programs decrease the time to close. The technique that we're going to use to test this hypothesis is what I like to call lift analysis. And the way I describe lift analysis is like a marketing scientist. You have a treatment group and you have a control group. The treatment group is the group of opportunities where a nurturing email influenced the opportunity, and your control group is the group of opportunities that did not receive the treatment. And so what we're doing here is we're looking at an influence report, a really basic one, that's looking at all the opportunities that were influenced by a nurturing email and what was their average velocity rate. And velocity rate in this context just means how many days between the opportunity create date and the opportunity close date. So we're seeing that when a nurturing email influenced the opportunity, it's taking about 26.5 days to close. So does that prove our hypothesis? Well, we don't know yet because we haven't looked at the control group. So to look at the control group, we actually run a report on the inverse. So this is a report where we're looking at all opportunities that were not influenced by a nurturing email and looking at their average velocity. And we're seeing here that it's taking an average of 41 days. So Melinda notes that her hypothesis is confirmed, that late-stage nurture programs decrease the time to close by an average of about 15 days. So conclusions we can draw from this is that late-stage nurturing programs are successful. So she's going to continue her efforts, let her marketing team know that they were successful, and kind of keep moving forward with that. And then her next steps is, now that she's done this lift analysis, she has other hypotheses she wants to test and knows this is a good technique for kind of determining whether a certain campaign or category of campaigns had any incremental impact on a specific metric like velocity. She could do the same kind of report on whether it had an effect on conversion rate or on total revenue. It's a really great technique to test that kind of effectiveness. So let's bring it full circle. For those of you who are response management customers, you may know or recognize this report. It's on your evaluating dashboard. I'm going to be pointing a lot to the evaluating dashboard because that's where all the attribution metrics are. But what this is showing you is what is the velocity rate on the bottom and what is the number of opportunities on the y-axis. And it's plotting all of your campaigns and comparing them against each other. So velocity rate is a number of days. So you actually want your campaigns to be in this upper left quadrant. That's your ideal, because that would mean it had the quickest velocity and it's influencing a lot of deals that have a short time frame. And so this will help you do that first piece of analysis where you're looking at your treatment group. And then if you have a hypothesis, you can easily create kind of the inverse report I talked about earlier. So let's look at our second hypothesis. Our definitive guide white paper had the greatest impact on the business. Well, how do we test this? And why does Melinda even have this hypothesis? So the reason why she has this hypothesis is she's looking at the attribution data and she's seeing that it's her top campaign by attribution in terms of revenue. It's influencing $4.3 million in revenue, which is a lot for this company. But being the smart marketer, she knows that this might not tell the entire story. And the tactic that we're going to use to figure out whether this hypothesis is true or not is we're going to actually look at multiple metrics and kind of deep dive into this specific campaign and see what we find. So the first thing that we're going to look at is we're going to look at top campaigns by conversion rate. And what I mean by conversion rate here, not to be confused with the funnel metrics, is this is a report that's looking at all closed opportunities and all grouped by campaign. So, and the conversion rate is of all the closed opportunities the campaign is influencing, what's the percent that's closed won? And so what we're seeing is our top 5 campaigns, our very first top campaign has a conversion rate of 87%, but our definitive guide white paper has a conversion rate of 58%, and it's actually our 37th best campaign in terms of conversion rate. So it's much lower than the top converting campaigns. Interesting. Another metric we can look at is top campaigns by deal size. So same thing, this is showing you what's the average, when a campaign influences an opportunity, what's the average amount of that opportunity? And for our top campaign, it's 522,000, but for our definitive guide, it's 191,000. So again, much lower than our top campaign by deal size. So before I move on to the next slide, I want you to notice, some of you may have already noticed this if you looked at this report, and the last report is look at these number of records. So we're seeing 31, 12, 649, and then boom, definitive guide white paper, 3,730. There seems to be a volume issue. So Melinda notices that, and she's like, okay, well, how many opportunities did the definitive guide white paper influence? It influenced 672 out of 788. So it pretty much influenced every single opportunity. And so what she's seeing is essentially some bias for this campaign. And it makes a lot of sense because this is the campaign that brings a lot of leads in the door. And it makes sense that this campaign is influential on all opportunities, but it doesn't necessarily mean, based on looking at all the other metrics, that this had the greatest impact on the business. Certainly an important campaign, but not necessarily the biggest impact. And so our hypothesis was disconfirmed. The definitive guide has just influenced more opportunities than most of our other campaigns. What are some conclusions? So one conclusion is that, in this case, just so you know, Melinda was using an even spread attribution model. And even spread models can positively bias campaigns with a large response volume. So she was able to notice that bias, and so her next steps are using the influence data to arrive at a more accurate weighted model. And so now it's time for a bonus tip. So one thing that she does, Melinda does as a marketing scientist, is that she can optimize her attribution model by using the data from the attribution model. So in this case, on the left, we're looking at a conversion report, an even spread model conversion report, and it's grouped by campaign type. So we see like our top campaign type by conversion rate is this conference campaign type. And so what that might lead her to do to optimize the model is then, why don't we give greater weight to conferences? Because it's generally leading to a higher conversion rate. So in this case, she's giving conferences an extra 2 points of credit. So she's continuously tweaking her model to make it more and more accurate as she looks at the data. So let's bring it full circle again. Again, your evaluating dashboard for those response management customers. There's 3 different charts that I want to point out. One is that first report she looked at is just her top campaigns by attribution. It's looking at all her won opportunities and what was the total revenue by campaign. The next 2 charts are, again, we're pointing back to those scatter plot charts. These are really helpful. These are probably my most favorite attribution reports because they compare campaigns against each other, which I think is a lot more effective than just saying, oh, this campaign brought in X revenue. You want to know how it did relative to your other campaigns. So on the x-axis here, we have our influence conversion rate. So what was the percentage of opportunities that were closed won? And then on your y-axis, you have your number of opportunities. So in this case, you want all of your campaigns to be in this upper right quadrant. That would mean they have a high conversion rate, influencing a lot of opportunities. And then similarly, we have the same thing for deal size. On the x-axis, it's your average opportunity amount. And on the y-axis, it's your opportunity count. So again, you want to be in the upper right corner, meaning that you're influencing a lot of large deals. Yeah, a lot of large deals. Our final hypothesis is as prospects progress in their buyer's journey, social becomes a more influential channel. She just believes this because as they get closer to that purchase decision, they might be engaging more with the company. So she's the tactic that we're gonna use to determine whether this hypothesis is correct is what I like to call campaign timing. So when did the social campaigns come in relative to the opportunity? And so one really cool field I want to point out that's on our campaign influence detail object is this opportunity time frame field. It tells you whether the touch occurred before the opportunity or during the opportunity. And what we're measuring in this case is this social channel, so the maroon section. And well, we're actually seeing, so this is actually showing us what the marketing mix is, because it's kind of a percentage of the total touches. So the marketing mix pre-opportunity was about 20% social, and then during the opportunity it was 10% social. So it went down. So it doesn't quite confirm our hypothesis. But what we might want to do is look more closely at the data. Oh, and then one other thing that she notices is this big pink section. It wasn't something that she was testing, but she sees that organic is playing a much larger role during the opportunity. So it's an interesting thing to note, but maybe this doesn't tell the entire story. Let's dive in a little bit closer. So what this chart is the same exact report, but it's actually breaking up the influence in 30-day cohorts before the close date. So we've got 181 plus days, 150 to 180, all the way up to 0 to 30. So what's the marketing mix as we get closer and closer to the opportunity closing? And one thing that we're seeing with the social channel in this maroon bar is that it's going up, going down, and going back up again. So that's actually pretty interesting. So while social touches aren't as frequent post or during the opportunity, as pre-opportunity, they do increase again about 60 days prior to opportunity close. So the hypothesis is kind of halfway confirmed. So what are some conclusions that she can draw from this? One is that social plays an important role throughout the buyer's journey, both early on and late. And then organic was an insight that she found just by accident in a way, but it becomes a big influencer during the opportunity. People are going directly to the website once they're getting closer and closer to that deal. So her marketing team has done a lot of website personalization efforts, and they know that that generally helps. So they're going to continue down that path. And so another thing that she can do as a next step is drill down further and look at other segments. So she might notice the marketing mix is different for enterprise sales versus small business sales, or for certain industries or job roles. And so she might dig into that. She might dig in more to the sequencing and whether that changes over time. So there's a lot of ways in which you can kind of slice and dice the data once you dig in. But as I mentioned, always come to the data with a hypothesis, otherwise it can be kind of overwhelming. So bringing it full circle on your evaluating dashboard, there are 2 different touch timing reports. One is touch timing by type 1 and touch timing by type lost. And the one side just shows you those 30-day cohorts on won opportunities, and then the lost one shows you those 30-day cohorts on lost opportunities, and it's grouped by campaign type, but you could just as easily break it down by any other field that you have on your opportunity or contact or campaign. And so what's helpful looking at these side by side is to notice whether there's a difference between won and lost. It might tell you that you should stop investing in certain channels and start investing in some others. So I'll kind of leave you with a quote. All models are wrong, but some are useful. This was said by a statistician, I think back in the 70s, named George Box. And that's kind of the way that I think about the influence models, is that they're a model. Remember, they're a model. So for example, the best model of a house might be a scaled down model of the house, but it's really the house itself that's the best model of a house, right? Another model of a house might be a painting, and they each kind of show you different perspectives. So yeah, they are basically all representations of the real thing, simplified to a greater or lesser degree. And so I feel like our attribution models are very similar. That they are a model. They have inherent biases, so it's our job as marketers to find those inherent biases, weed them out, and optimize. So, key takeaways. Test your hypotheses. Use attribution data to determine what are the key characteristics of your most successful campaigns, so you can start investing in those, or even what your key characteristics of your least successful campaigns. And then use lift analysis to answer the question, did this group of campaigns have any incremental impact on a specific metric, whether it's velocity like we did in our hypothesis, conversion, total revenue, anything like that. And then finally, remember to use multiple metrics when looking at attribution. Total revenue is only one data point. So ensure you're taking a holistic view of all your successful deals by also analyzing velocity, conversion, deal size, timing for all your key segments. So I know I went pretty quickly, but if anyone has any questions. So yeah. Yes.
How would you recommend communicating some of this? I mean, Melinda's one person. When you've got worldwide marketers and you're testing different things and you're tweaking models, we're in a position where we almost want to stick to one thing, at least for an official rollout, and then do some deep dives on our own. But when we do come up, like, how do you recommend scaling a little bit of it?
That's a good question. I mean, I do get that question a lot of like, what model do I start with? How do I figure out what to give weight to? And I don't think there's anything wrong in starting simple, like even with the even spread model, just knowing that there are inherent biases. So in terms of scaling, I guess, I mean, you might have one team that's kind of owning the optimization of it and continuously tweaking it. I mean, one thing that's really great about Full Circle is you can have 3 different models at once. So you might roll out with an even spread model and kind of work on your weighted model, and then roll that out once you feel comfortable with it. Yes.
One question on the weighted part of that. You had 1s and 2s. Are those percentages? Are those numbers?
Yeah, so the attribution models use a point-based weighting system. So say you have a single opportunity and there's 4 influential touches. each of those touches gets a certain number of points based on what you set in the model. So if there was a conference touch, that touch might get 3 points, and then maybe a white paper touch got 1 point. And then the dollar amount of that opportunity is split across the number of points, so the conference actually gets a greater proportion of credit. All right. Yes?
Do you recommend holding out control groups both at a master level and by campaign?
So like when drilling into like a lift analysis, looking at an individual tactic and then a group of tactics, I think, yeah, both work. If you have a particular campaign where you want to see whether that campaign had incremental impact, you can look at it really granular, or you can look at it really high level. Like in the case that we ran through, we were looking at all nurturing emails, not just one specific email. All right.
When you're creating the models, I think you have 2 different radial buttons you can choose from: individual opportunity and ABM.
So yeah, you can do an opportunity-based model where you're just looking at campaigns that have touched contacts on the opportunity, or you can do an account-based model where you're giving credit to campaigns associated with contacts at the same account. And so it's a little more broad.
And a matched lead model too. Now.
And yeah, and a matched lead. So for those of you who have Matchmaker, interested in Matchmaker, and want to give attribution to leads that haven't converted, you can also do that. So it's pretty cool.
And you can also filter out certain roles or titles.
Yeah, it's really flexible, so you can have really flexible exclusions. So if there are like partners you want to exclude, then you can exclude partners, or however you want to do it. And I guess, are we at time? You're waving. All right. I guess that's it.